Welcome back to Derech, Hashem, the way of God with Sight or Kesher, Jewish Education in Manchester. We are going through the way of God by Rabbi Mordechai Goodman in a kind of really methodical way. And you join us here beginning the second chelek, beginning the second section of the book. We've done like 90 or so pages together. It's an amazing achievement. Well done. You've finished a quarter of the book. Now we're going to start the next volume, which is volume 2. And we describe the idea of providence. What's providence? If you remember back from last time, interface, oversight, supervision, or interaction. Anything that God does between himself and anything which isn't him. When he's having any kind of relationship or interaction with something not him, that's a form of hashgacha, of interaction, supervision, oversight. There's no English word. It's a mixture of all those words. You have to kind of translate that in your head. However, that's how hashgacha is translated. We're now going to be on page 91 in this book, but if you're using a different print, you're reading online with some other kind of print, then we're in section 2, chapter 1.1, the very, very beginning of the second section. It's evident that everything that exists both above and below was created only because the highest wisdom deemed these phenomena necessary and useful for the furthering of the purpose of creation as a whole. It stands in stark contrast to evolutionary theory and the concept of accidentalism. Accidentalism, by the way, is a complete farce. That everything starts with an accident. One thing bumped into another and things just happen. First of all, there's nothing accidental in the universe. They're all following laws. Nothing just bumps into something for no reason. It bumped into it because a force compelled it to go that way somehow. You just can't get your head around it. Also, you can't call it an accident. What is an accident? An accident is where someone willed something and it didn't go to plan. I wanted to go down the road and an accident happened and therefore I couldn't go there. Right? So an accident presupposes a will that was somehow stymied. You can't say that the universe happened as an accident, because if you do, there was someone's will that wanted to do something different from making the universe, and by accident, the universe popped up. So if you want to rule God out the picture, you can't use the word accident. You have to say that somehow the entire universe is an outcome of totally and utterly random events, which we know physically it isn't. All the events are governed by incredibly definable laws which can't intrinsically be accidental. And the laws haven't evolved or changed over time at all. Gravity, light, mass, density are all fixed. They're all constant. Really, if it was evolving, everything should change every week. And you would have no stasis in the immutable laws of nature. It's incredible. So clearly, it's a design. Number 2, everything that God's created, whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not, was created for a purpose. What are the purpose of mosquitoes? What are the purpose of leeches? I don't know. I mean, leeches have 10 pairs of eyes going down their backs. They're very carefully designed creatures. What's their purpose? I don't know. But there's got to be a purpose. If you remember me another time, I do the wolves of Yellowstone Park, where we saw that the whole world is a biosphere, and the wolves affected the deer, which affected the grass, which they eat, which affected the roots, which affected the soil composition, which affected the river, which affected the salmon, which affected the bald eagles. This is the famous Wolves of Yellowstone Park in the National Geographic, as to how reintroducing wolves to curb the deer, to allow the trees to grow, allowed salmon to come back to river, which allowed bald eagles, which are fish eagles, to repopulate an area of a park. Every creature has its balance in the web of the whole world that it's playing its part. Do you know what No, I don't know what each creature does. It's not my job. But we do know that each creature was designed for purpose, and there is a purpose it's fulfilling, and that God wouldn't create an atom if it wasn't necessary. He's got function for everything, which is why we can't be cruel to animals and wipe out animals. We can't make animals extinct for no reason. You can't do that. There's a purpose for those animals. There's a lot of environmental law in Torah, by the way. The natural law and property of each created thing was ordained by the highest wisdom to perfectly fit the role that each thing plays in the general scheme. It's given the right atomic structure, the right genetic structure to be able to fulfill what it is God wants from it. He wants zebra. There's a certain thing zebra do, and they work with the other animals and the elephants and on the plains in order to make a certain environment that he wants, in which case zebra need to be engineered genetically to fulfill their particular role. They have to have hooves, they have to have eyes, they have to have mate, they have to have body and musculature. Since each thing was initially created for a purpose, which means nothing is useless. There's no accident. it was purposefully made, it is appropriate that it be maintained as long as it is serving its purpose. If it's a functioning concept, let's keep it going. God created all things, and he continues to oversee them. Again, Epicurean philosophy. Epicurean is apikoros in the Gemara. That's where God created things and then walked off. He said, yeah, like a watch. I created it, put it on the mantelpiece, walked off, and that's a self-sustaining system with no governance. It's only governed by the laws I set up at the beginning. Not true. God is actually accurately maintaining and like the blue-orange analogy. Remember we did that right at the beginning? If you think up a blue-orange in a room, it isn't there unless you're thinking it up. You can't think it up and then walk off and it's self-sustaining as a thought. So too, every moment of existence has to be with the input of this being. That's what it means. He continues to oversee them and maintain them in the state he desires. That's the idea of providence, or badly translated providence. Interface, interaction, supervision, oversight, hashgacha. Let's call it hashgacha from here. It's just easier to say, okay? We're on the clock. Point 2. As we've discussed earlier, which is section 1, chapter 5.3, which in this book is page 79, the beginnings of all created things are in the CD. They're in the code. They're in the kaichas, the forces, where they're encoded as a raw code. All physical things, which are down here, result from whatever's encoded up here, right? And their details and consequences of what's reflected to them by these forces follows their own detailed qualities. A zebra's going to have hooves. An elephant's got to have a trunk. That's got to be encoded up here. There's nothing large or small, like an ant or an elephant, in the physical world that doesn't have its cause and origin somewhere on the CD. There's not a single instrument that comes out the speaker that you hear when you're playing your favourite CD that wasn't somehow on the CD. If it's coming out the speaker, trumpet, electric guitar, a singer, a drummer, and you hear all these sounds, there has to be some encoding complex-wise. There has to be some energy or information on the CD that says, make that sound like a trumpet. Make that sound like a set of drums. It has to be there. Otherwise it wouldn't be there. If it's here, it's got to be attached to the kaichas. It's got to be attached to those forces. All physical things result from them, and their details are a consequence of what is reflected to them by the forces, following their own detailed qualities. There's nothing large or small that doesn't have its cause or origin among some aspect of these forces. The one who oversees all the concepts is God himself. And he does so in the same way that he created them. That's a big secret that's being revealed. Accordingly, he first oversees the array of the forces, and then everything that results from their essential nature. He supervises the angelic agents who are appointed to maintain the existence and function of everything that exists, and he gives them the power to do their tasks, which means there's 3 things which happen in the green arrow: environmental, genetic, and horoscopic factors or elements. Environmental, genetic, and horoscopic influences. This is known in the Torah as hashgacha klolis, general providence. I'm mistranslating hashgacha, there's providence, but I don't have another English word. General interface is environment, genetic, and horoscopic. Those are the 3 main things he uses to interface with life on all planets, be it planet Earth or anywhere else. The human race, however, is different from all other species, and our Kabbalists teach us, and this is the Ari HaKodesh and the Radak, that we would also be different from any sentient life found on any other planet. And that is that we were given complete free will, complete volition, in a way that other sentient beings aren't, and the ability to involve ourselves with both perfection and deficiency, which means God closeness or God distance. That is not particularly potent with other sentient beings. Man is therefore an active, moving influence in the system. We're major players in the role of the rectification of the universe. We're partnering with God on that because that's what he set up. And we're not something that's merely acted upon, even though we are acted upon, obviously. Like you've got brown hair or black hair or yellow hair and blue eyes. That's acted upon by your genetics. Obviously, we're acted upon by this downward system. We are also active in influencing, we're influencers of the system with God to make a circuit. That's not something the animals do, and that's not something the angels do or the forces do. Everything else but humans are merely affected, green arrow, top down. We are affected top down, and we affect bottom up with a red arrow. Now, our red arrow that comes up rewrites the CD to a certain amount, that's within the limitations of what's allowed to be rewritten, which affects the new green arrow coming down. Like, we can either keep the pipes clear, or we can block the pipes affecting the water flow. That's on you. Remember, this is all the system. God is not the system. This is the system that God created to interface with you. It's not him personally. So he's not being affected if you clog up the pipes, but the way in which he interfaces with you will be affected. That's true. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan gives a lovely analogy. If you're playing chess with God, you're guaranteed to lose. But how he wins is completely down to you. If you play white and you play very well, he's always going to have the most perfect move back. But it's your decision as to whether or not you move the pawn, the knight, the bishop, the queen, the king, the rook, whatever you're going to move and where you're going to move it is your call entirely. He's not forcing you where you're going to. It's your call. You're playing that. How he's going to defeat you, how he'll win that game, is completely based upon the movements you make. How he interfaces with you is based completely upon your interaction with him. Now, you can't overthrow him. It's the system. He's immutable. You can't. But you can dictate how the system will happen. That you can do. That's the influence he's given you, because you are a truly free-willed creature that he's created. Remember, God isn't a creature. He's a being, yeah? Okay. The providence dealing with humans must therefore be different from that concerning every other species. In the case of humanity, this interaction, hashgacha, influence system must oversee and scrutinize every detail of human activity and bring things about that are the result of human activity. So if that's what people are doing, I will respond alike in the same way to keep the system running. Each of a person's deeds, as well as their results, are scrutinized, and providence is then extended to that person in the particular manner that suits their consequences, and the individual is judged measure for measure. You did that, so I'll pay you back with that. You did this, then I'll interface with you with this. As will be discussed in a later chapter. Remember, Jethro, converted to Judaism because he saw that the Egyptians threw the Jewish babies, into the Nile. And it was with the very same element, water, that he had the Egyptians themselves drowned with. You drown my children with water, I'll drown yours in water. That's how it works. Measure for measure. Ties up all loose ends. Jethro was so impressed he converted to Judaism. He was like, that's it. That's got to be. Remember, he was the Pope. He was the high priest of every religion. He had tried every religion out. And he was very disliked because he abandoned them. Imagine the Pope of the Christian Pope today just abandons Christianity looking into Buddhism or something. And then he looked into Buddhism and abandoned that. Became the Dalai Lama, abandoned that. Everyone would hate him. How could you be such a traitor? Then finally he converts to Judaism. That was Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. And he said, this is it. I found it. Why? Measure for measure. It's got to be under control. He's got to be watching you. He's got to be making a decision based upon how you're behaving. And he's got to have the power to respond to you in the way that you responded to him. If you threaten his king with a rook, he'll take that rook with a bishop. Like, he'll make a move. It's obvious that you're dealing with someone who is watching your actions, motivations, strategy. This is not true of any other species than man. Only man is interfaced with this, because you need an interface with man like this, because he's a player. He's got a bottom-up red arrow, an indeterministic influence, which is going to affect the system. The members of other species, like ducks and herons, are acted upon, but they've no influence themselves. They run the program. They run the duck program. They merely exist to maintain the species as a whole according to the nature of its spiritual root, what that species of duck has to comply with, what role it has in the natural world. Providence is thus merely extended to maintain the root and its branches according to the inherent nature and function of that root. But human beings, on the other hand, act and exert influence as individuals. What are we learning here? They've got to have their own providential track. And everything must be the result of their deeds, no more or no less. And that's what we'll discuss next time. That humans require their own special train track of providence. That God's got to make a whole interface track specifically for humans, because humans are highly different, highly unusual. They have their own influences. God has opened the door for that, which means we've got to have a whole interface, interaction, supervision system, hashgacha system, which can deal with such a free-willed volition being, acting on the system, changing the system, damaging the system, rectifying the system. So we've got to have a special system that deals with them. I look forward to discussing the next chapter, which will be section 2, chapter 2, next time with you. And there we'll talk about how humans interface with the world, what they do, how they can repair, how they can damage, and we'll do that together. Thank you so much. Have an amazing week. All the best.